Okay. Well, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui whakaherehera and ngā mihi ki te korero ko Fiona. Welcome everybody to this important hui ko Karen Workman tōku ingoa, ko takumahi ki Resale Royalties Aotearoa toi Huarau. So my name is Karen Workman and I am here today representing Resale Royalties Aotearoa toi Huarau. So welcome to this informational session. This is going to be just information basically about the scheme that Fiona's already mentioned. Comes into effect on December 1st, the Resale Royalty for Visual Artists Act of 2023. So today is an introductory overview of the scheme, how it will operate, and it's also a chance for us to introduce Resale Royalties Aotearoa to you as the appointed administrator of this new legislation. So I'll be providing some context and some elementary information about what artist resale royalty covers and how it will be administered. Today, we're focused on how this affects publicly funded galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, because it will affect different bodies in different ways. But first of all, to start, I'd like to mihi to and introduce Sam Irvin, Chief Executive of Copyright Licensing New Zealand and of Resale Royalties Aotearoa. Sam has been spearheading the development of RRA and is really invested in designing this process that makes resale royalty clear and efficient and making a positive difference in the art market in Aotearoa. So, kia ora, Sam. Over to you after you unmute.
Kia ora, Karen. Kia ora tātou. Ko Sam Irvin tāku ingoa, ko mana whakahare, CLNZ Resale Royalty Aotearoa. So yes, thanks again, Karen, and thank you, Fiona, for the introduction. I'm the Chief Executive of Copyright Licensing New Zealand and also Resale Royalties Aotearoa. So just a little bit about Copyright Licensing New Zealand. We're a not-for-profit organisation and we've been in operation since the 80s. We have we're, if you like, owned by the New Zealand Society of Authors and the Publishers Association of New Zealand. We also have independent directors on our board, and we've also recently added a visual arts advisor and begun working more closely with the visual arts community through a copyright licensing scheme for auction houses that has been successfully in operation for the last 2 years. What I would just like to talk a little bit about is how we ended up with Resale Royalties Aotearoa. So last year we took part in a contestable process that the Ministry of Culture and Heritage managed. And primarily that was designed to find the best organisation to manage this scheme that resulted from the free trade agreement with the EU and the UK to bring in a resale royalty scheme for artists to New Zealand. And we were very lucky to be awarded that contract by the ministry, and since May have been busy getting ourselves prepared. I think the first thing to say is that, or another thing to say is that Resale Royalties Aotearoa is 100% owned by Copyright Licensing New Zealand, and of course is also not for profit. So we manage the scheme on behalf of the Crown. And I think that's probably all. I'll leave it over to you, Karen, and come back later to answer some questions that you've already forwarded. Ka pai.
Great. Kia ora, Sam. Thank you. Tēnā koe for explaining the whakapapa and the kaupapa of RRA. So as I mentioned, the order of the day is to explain the scheme and then we'll answer those pre-submitted questions. If you submitted a question that doesn't get answered, I want you to know that we're working through them all, and many of the questions will make their way onto the FAQ section of the website. So a little bit more about that later. The idea of resale royalty in New Zealand isn't new. It was first introduced in 2008. The proposal didn't make any progress really at that time, and then the idea was reintroduced as a potential amendment to the Copyright Act in around 2018. The Copyright Act review that was underway at that time was suspended during the other events of 2020, as I'm sure you are aware, and then so was any talk of a resale royalty scheme. However, here we are now with this new legislation coming into play, as has already been mentioned, on the back of those free trade agreements. So as part of the free trade agreements, we have committed, or the government committed, to establishing an artist resale royalty scheme, and that's what's coming into effect on December 1st. We're just here to help everybody understand the legislation and the regulations and to administer the process. I'm sure many of you already know that this concept of artist resale royalty had its beginnings in France with this painting, The Angelus by Jean-Francois Millet. It was originally commissioned, and then it was first sold for about 1,000 francs in 1860. And then it was resold after Millet's death in 1889 for a whopping 553,000 francs during a bidding war between the Louvre and the American Art Association. So Millet's family, who were penniless at the time, really didn't benefit at all from that resale. So the French did what the French do well, and that was to provoke a public outcry and petition for protective legislation for artists. And so the French introduced droit de suite, or artist resale right, in 1920. So since that time, a lot of countries have added resale royalty rights, and this year we're joining them. There's over 100 countries already, including 30 out of the 38 OECD countries that already have this in their legislation. And as Fiona already indicated, we're a little slow to the party, but here we are. As we get underway with this, there are key people or parties involved in the art market or in buying and selling of artwork. So I just want to go through a few definitions here so we're quite sure of who is who. So the first is art market professional. Basically, if you're an auctioneer, a dealer, a consultant, a gallery owner or operator, or anyone else in the business of dealing in visual artworks, you're considered to be an art market professional. Of course, we have buyers and sellers. Clearly, those are parties or people who buy and sell artwork, and that includes collectors. And we have successors, who are often the descendants of the artist, but they may be anyone to whom the artist has left the resale rights to their work. In essence, the purpose of this new legislation is this right here. It's to give eligible artists or their successors the right to receive a royalty payment whenever there's a qualifying resale of their original artwork. And the kaupapa behind this act is to acknowledge the rising value of artwork over time and to provide a legacy benefit for the artist and their family. So what is the context in which the scheme applies? Well, it's basically this. An artist creates a work and sells it to buyer A. Sometime later, buyer A is going to sell that work to buyer B. That's a resale. And clearly, over time, there could be any number of subsequent resales. So the art could be listed and sold through an art market professional, for example, an auction house or a dealer or a gallery, or maybe an art consultant has been contracted to provide valuation with respect to that sale. So that would be one situation, or perhaps it's a sale that doesn't involve an art market professional. In either case, every sale after the first sale is a resale. Now, for the scheme to apply, the resale price must be at least $2,000. 5% of that resale value is deposited with RRA as the royalty payment. And RRA is going to retain one of those portions of one of those 5% for administration, and the other 4/5 gets passed on to the artist, or if they're deceased, to their estate. So it's not every resale that qualifies though. So let's have a look and see what makes it eligible. First of all, artists have to be New Zealand citizens or residents. They can also be a citizen or a resident of a reciprocating country that has an artist resale royalty scheme. And at the moment, we have reciprocal agreement negotiations underway with the UK and with Australia. We anticipate an expansion of reciprocal agreements with other countries in the future, but that's where we stand right now. Also, a successor who has inherited the rights will also be eligible, but they also have to be citizens or residents of either New Zealand or a reciprocating country. And lastly, the sale must occur no more than 50 years after the original artist has died. In addition, the work must be an original visual artwork, and you can see that the range of visual artwork in the Resale Royalty for Visual Artists Act is quite wide. Let me just read it to you. Cultural expressions of Māori or Pacific peoples, ethnic or cultural art that is a variation of any of the below. We have painting, drawing, carving, engraving, etching, lithography, wood cutting, printing, including a book of prints, sculpture, collage, modeling, craft work, ceramics, glassware, jewelry, textiles, weaving, metalware, furniture, photography or video art, multimedia art, and art created using computers or other electronic devices. So you can see it's quite a wide range of material right there. What it does not include, or what is specifically excluded, are buildings, dramatic and musical works, which is works as specified by the Copyright Act. So that means your scripts, screenplays, scores, and other music notation, that is not included. And literature is not included unless that written work contains a visual artwork. Importantly, original means that the artist created or authorized the creation of the works, for example, when you're using a fabricator, and that it's one of a limited number of copies. Now, there is no quantity given in the Act as to what number that would be. Limited means that the artist deliberately chose to only create a certain number of that work. So resale royalty won't apply to works that have been mass produced. But let's say we do have an original visual artwork made by an eligible artist who is a citizen or resident of New Zealand or a reciprocating country, and let's say it has been resold for $2,000 or more. If we have all of those things, this makes it a qualifying resale. And that qualifying resale could have occurred under one of two situations, which I mentioned already, but we'll go into it a little bit further here. If one or more of the parties is an art market professional, like a dealer, a gallery, an auctioneer, someone else professionally engaged in the art market, or if they are part of the G.L.A.M sector, which means publicly funded art gallery, library, archive, or museum that collects and displays artworks, then it is considered to be a professional qualifying resale. In this situation, it'll be the art market professionals who report the sale to RRA and who are legally obligated to pay the resale royalty to RRA. Now, if there are no art market professionals or G.L.A.M involved, but the resale conditions still make it eligible, then what we have is a voluntary qualifying resale. And you'll find that if it's just person to person. If the resale transaction does not involve any art market professionals or any of the G.L.A.M organizations, but the parties involved decide between them and agree that this is a qualifying resale, then it will be considered a voluntary qualifying resale. And in that situation, the parties involved make and put 3 decisions in writing. So number 1, they're going to agree that it's a qualifying resale. Number 2, they're going to agree on a royalty, which can be any amount that they choose. And then number 3, they'll agree on whose responsibility it is to provide the information and the payment to RRA. So understanding those terms gives us a little bit of clarity on what that resale right means. So for resale royalty rights to apply, we have to have eligible artists, we're having a qualifying resale, and we have to have original artwork. I just want to make a distinction here between the resale royalty scheme and licensing schemes. So as Sam already indicated, Copyright Licensing New Zealand has for decades issued licenses to a lot of organizations and institutions around Aotearoa. This helps to administrate compliance with copyright law, and it gives greater access to printed material like books and other publications. Now, through that licensing scheme, royalties are paid back to authors on the use and reproduction of their work. So that's one example. This auction house licensing scheme is one example of how licensing works for visual material as well. Under that scheme, auction houses pay for a license in order to reproduce artists' work in their catalogues, which are then made available in print and online. So as those works used are reported by auction houses, then artists get a royalty for the appearance and for the reproduction of their artwork. And that whole process is managed by Copyright Licensing New Zealand. Artist resale royalty is managed by RRA, and the operations are separate from CLNZ. So While we have auction houses involved in both programs, I'm showing this to show you that licensing compensates the reproduction of an artwork, while resale royalty covers the resale of an artwork, and the administration for us is distinct. So let's now talk about the process. So no matter whether it's a voluntary or a professional qualifying resale, the sale has to be reported in writing and the royalty must be deposited with RRA within 60 days of the completion of that transaction. So when we've been notified and the royalty has been deposited, RRA will contact the artist and send them their portion of the royalty. And you can see on the screen here, I've said in a timely manner, and that's because sometimes there are challenges with finding accurate confirmation or accurate information for an artist, and particularly for an artist's estate. Rest assured, though, we do have an experienced and dedicated team of researchers. Their purpose is to track down rights holders in order to distribute those royalties. When they've been contacted, the artist can accept or decline all or a part of that royalty payment. If they decline, the royalty goes straight to the cultural fund that's going to be established to support and contribute to the careers of visual artists. With every future resale, however, the artist gets to choose to accept or decline the royalty. So in other words, declining the one royalty payment doesn't mean an artist can't accept royalties from future resales of that same work. If we can't find the artist, that money will be kept in reserve for 6 years. And during that 6 years, if it continues to go unclaimed or it has been declined, those royalties will go into the cultural fund. If an artist believes that their work has been resold and they are eligible for the scheme, they can contact RRA and potentially claim those royalties. The best way to make sure that everything goes to the right places and the right people in a timely manner is to register as an artist or a successor on the website resaleroyalties.co.nz. There is no requirement for an artist to register to benefit for the scheme. Registering, though, means that we can accurately and quickly find and pay the royalty. When you register, if you're an artist, you'll be prompted to fill out a short form. Actually, everybody gets to fill out a short form. You may be, depending on who you are, required to upload proof of identity, such as a driver's license. And if you have questions around what's being asked for and why, we have a privacy policy on the website, but it really is about finding the right people to pay the royalty to. It'll just take a few minutes, but you'll be sure that you're in the best place to stay informed. If you're an artist, you're in the best place to receive royalties as the scheme rolls out. There's also a really robust FAQ section that Rose is doing a fantastic job of keeping up to date. We recognise that the scheme is new to everybody, and the list of questions there serves to address all these concerns as directly and efficiently as we can. Registering on the website is also the best way to stay up to date if you're an art market professional or in the G.L.A.M sector. There will be new things, I am sure, to address as the legislation comes into effect. On the website, specifically for you, you will find a download link to a guide for G.L.A.M organisations with a lot of additional information, more than I'm going to give you today, written as clearly and succinctly as possible. So what you'll find there is how the scheme affects you, the process for reporting, paying, distributing the royalty, all of our other support services. There's a resource guide, there are flowcharts and checklists and other reference tools there. We're trying to make sure that everyone has the tools and information needed to be in compliance with the legislation and regulations. I think Rose has probably popped the link in the chat for the website. What you can see, or what you can expect to see as we get closer to December 1st, is an increase in functionality on the website, along with more information and an expanding list of FAQs and assistance for identifying eligible artists and so on. This is also the place that you'll turn to if you've got queries about specific situations. So I understand, or we understand, that there are some situations that are unique and that things might have to be taken a little bit on a case-by-case basis. So you can submit your questions directly and we will respond to you directly and personally from RRA as well. If you want to read the legislation and regulations for yourself, you can find links to them on our website, or you can find them on the New Zealand legislation website and search these titles. So we have now come to the time for questions. I might have mentioned it earlier. We won't get the chance to answer every question that was submitted. We've tried to collate them as best we can. There will be a follow-up email sent to you after the session with links to the FAQs and other information. But please don't hesitate to ask questions through the contact form. Oftentimes the questions that get asked will make their way onto the FAQ list because you probably aren't the only person who's asking these questions, and everybody needs this information. So you've already met Sam, and I'd also like to welcome Caroline Stone, who's our legal consultant, who many of you already know. Caroline has significant experience and connections at the intersection of law and art, and both Sam and Caroline are going to help me answer a few questions today. So starting off with question 1, Caroline, I think I'll have you take this one. How will the scheme work for galleries who often buy at auction to resell? Will the royalty be payable twice? So Caroline, if you're ready to answer, you can unmute if you're not already, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So I think that's right. If every time there is a resale, there will be a royalty. Someone will be liable to pay the royalty. And so if the same artwork is resold 2 or 3 times, there will be 2 or 3 royalties payable. The first sale is always going to be excluded, and that's even if it's not technically a sale, it's a transfer of ownership. A gift is still regarded as a sale. If the artist gifts their work to someone else and that person then resells it, sells it, that is a resale. So yes, every time there's a resale or change of ownership for consideration, there will be a royalty that will be payable.
Great,
yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. The second question there is there a process to ascertain how many copies have been made? What is a limited number of copies? I'll take this one. As I've already mentioned, there is no specified quantity in the legislation or the regulations, but what we're really talking about is the fact that the artist has decided to limit the number of copies when they created the work. So let's say an artwork of some kind is being resold. It's valued at more than $2,000, but you aren't sure if it qualifies for resale royalty because it's not clear how many copies were made. As you know, if it's a limited edition, it's often going to be indicated by notation, for example, 1/100, for example, on a painting. Sometimes it's going to be clear due to the nature of a work. And if there's no indication, it's usually safe to assume it's not a limited edition. But I'd like to remind you that resale royalty applies only when the artist is either alive or it's been less than 50 years since they died. So it's reasonable to assume that the information about that artwork should be possible to come by. If the artist is unknown, a similar practice will apply. It's really up to the parties involved in the sale to do their due diligence in figuring it out. You are the art experts, not us. So we are not looking for any, you are the experts. Let's just leave it at that. You're the experts. We're not the experts. So we expect that you would do good faith efforts and so on to find out that information, and that would be sufficient. And just as a note, it's always good to keep records of those efforts to find out, just in case there's a question later on. But going back to that original question, in the event that information isn't there, good faith efforts should be enough. Question number 3, has there been any consideration regarding the extension of copyright duration that will be enacted sometime in the next 4 years? Sam, that one to you.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, good question. And yes, the short answer is yes, it has. Part of the free trade agreement was a extension of the copyright term to 70 years to align ourselves with the EU, UK, and actually most countries in the OECD. So when that is enacted, there will be a change made to the Resale Royalty for Artists Act as well. We do think that there will be a change to or changes made to as part of the Copyright Act review, which we think will be next year. So that could happen as soon as perhaps the end of 2025 or 2026. But obviously we'll provide information around that at the time that it will prior to the time that it becomes relevant. So yes, the short answer is yes, there will be a change. We're just unsure of when that date will be, but we will communicate that in full when we know more.
Great, thank you. I'm going to have you answer question number 4 as well. Are G.L.A.M required to report all sales or only qualifying resales?
Yes, fair question. No, just qualifying resales, and that goes for everyone involved in the scheme. So G.L.A.M is not any exception. Only the qualifying resales. I guess where there's a G.L.A.M to G.L.A.M sale, then and there's no art market professional involved, then it's up to those two parties to agree who will report and who will pay. So that's, I think, also relevant to the first question that Caroline answered.
Great, thank you. Question number 5. If art is sold in the retail store of a museum, is the museum then considered an art market professional? Caroline, are you able to take this question?
Sure. So yeah, this was an interesting question and something I hadn't thought of before. And yes, to some extent, in that case, the retail store at the museum, if they're selling original artworks, then they are going to be regarded as an art market professional in terms of the Act. And in practice, though, it possibly won't really matter whether they're regarded as a G.L.A.M or an art market professional. Either way, they're going to be responsible for reporting and paying the royalty if they're liable, if it is a resale. And I guess that was something I didn't touch on the first question, and I don't want to get too bogged down in details, but how the retail store stocks the shop is going to depend on whether they have doing a resale or a sale. If they're selling things on consignment, which is the way many galleries do sell, then there hasn't technically been a transfer of ownership or a previous sale. So the first sale might be just a sale, not a resale. But if the museum store is buying off the artist and then going to on sale, it is a secondary sale, and they will need to do the reporting and be responsible for the payment most likely. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Question 6. If a work is purchased and only later found to be a qualifying resale due to research, how and when do G.L.A.M report that? Can I throw that to you, Sam?
Sure, Karen. Yeah, looking at the legislation, in Section 8 it says, this is of the regulations, it requires reporting and payment within 60 days of the resale, so the date of the transaction. So I guess within that time, if it's found to become a qualifying resale, then that should be reported. Otherwise, it's then at the, it then becomes a responsibility, I guess, of the reseller. But I think the key thing to remember here is that 60-day requirement under the regulation to report the resale if it is qualifying.
Great, thank you. I think the other part of that that regulation says that if you become aware of your obligation later on, then it will be 60 days from the date that you become aware of your obligation. So it might take time for everybody to become aware, but yes, thank you, Sam, 60 days. Let's see, our last question here. Does RRA have expectations on G.L.A.M when determining the value of individual items within an accession lot? Is evidence evaluation by a subject expert needed? Sam, I think I'll give that one to you too.
Yeah, fair question. And look, we're not valuers and we're not the experts in valuation. So we're relying on in this case, the G.L.A.M sector to provide that. If, however, I guess someone raised that issue with us, then we would be asking for evidence of the valuation. But at this stage, no, there's no evidence required unless it's queried by a third party.
Great. Rosa, is there anything else that we need to cover that you are aware of?
No, there'll be a follow-up email with all the relevant information and links to our FAQs.
Great, excellent, thank you. I'd like to, as I said, don't hesitate to engage with us, and please do visit the website. You are going to see some changes, but thank you so much for pre-submitting those very, very good questions. And thank you, Sam and Caroline, for helping with the with answering those things. Hopefully that gives you some more information that you didn't have before. I'd like to leave you with this translation for Toi Huarau, the name that we've been given. It means the art of many benefits for many people. And it was inspired by and based on the concept of mutual benefit for the artist and the art market, and importantly, a practice of providing legacy value for the artist's family. So thanks again to my colleagues for being present and answering questions, and thank you all for coming to our meeting today. Ngā mihi nui to Museums Aotearoa also for co-hosting and for gathering us all together. We appreciate the time and the opportunity to share with you, as well as the time that you've taken to be here, either live or watching the replay. So obviously there's more to come as the scheme comes into effect, but I do encourage you to go to the website to register and follow us on social media, just so that you're up to date and in the know. ResaleRoyalties.co.nz. Does anybody have any, do we have any last words here for anybody, from anybody else? We're good to go. We're good to go. So, huri no e te whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, mā te wā, and have a good rest of the day. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Kia ora. Thanks, Karen.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.